Hymen. If body parts had PR teams, then the hymen would definitely need a complete rebranding because right now its reputation is stuck somewhere between misunderstood biology and ancient superstition. It's like that one employee at a company who doesn't really do much but still gets talked about in every meeting. So basically the hymen is just a thin elastic piece of tissue hanging out at the opening of the honeypot. Think of it as a decorative doorway curtain. It's there, but it's not exactly stopping anyone from walking through. There's no real reason why it's even there in the first place, but some doctors are saying that it might have served a minor protective role during infancy, like a soft barrier against infection. But by puberty, the hymen are basically in early retirement, lounging around with no real responsibilities. And when it naturally wears away, whether gradually or all at once, it doesn't cause harm, improve health, or even leave a parting gift. It's like a coworker who quietly quits and no one really notices they're gone. It's a body part that's about as useful as a submarine with screen doors. It's there, but you're left wondering why anyone bothered in the first place. Evolution seems to agree because about 0.03% of people are born without a hymen, and they're just as fine as everyone else. Subclavius muscle. If your muscles are office employees, the subclavius muscle would be the guy in the corner cubicle who shows up to every meeting but rarely speaks, so no one even knows he's there. The subclavius is basically just a small muscle under your shoulder that's useful only if you're walking on all fours or swinging from vine to vine like Tarzan. It played a role in stabilizing our upper body when we used our front limbs to move around, especially when you're trying to run away from becoming the lunch of a saber-toothed tiger. But since we left that behind a long time ago and switched to standing upright, walking on two legs, and using our arms for more advanced tasks like juggling or giving enthusiastic high fives, the subclavius became less of a main character and more of an extra on set. Although this muscle has no idea that its glory days are over, it's still hanging out under your shoulder like that guest who stays at the party long after the music has stopped and the hosts are yawning. So, since the muscle is as useful to you as hair conditioner to a bald man, evolution might decide to phase it out completely in the next 100 or 1,000 years. We won't be losing much, except maybe one less thing to mention in an anatomy trivia night. 13th rib. Now, most of us are standard issue with 12 pairs of ribs, but about 1% of the population gets an extra one, which sits at the very bottom of the rib cage like an extra player who didn't make it into the starting lineup. This bonus rib is a throwback to our primate ancestors, who needed 13 ribs to provide them with structural support for climbing trees, running from predators, and generally staying alive in the wild. The extra ribs were basically the Swiss Army knife of survival tools. But as we evolved to harvest fruits from trees without climbing and no longer live across from neighbors who only see us as mouth-watering pieces of steak, the 13th rib has basically vanished in 99% of the population. Even if you were born with the whole package, it won't make you more flexible, it won't protect you in a wrestling match, and it certainly won't help you squeeze into skinny jeans. It's basically the extra fries at the bottom of the bag of anatomy. Surprising, but not exactly life-changing. Sometimes this rogue rib can press on nerves or blood vessels, leading to a condition called thoracic outlet syndrome. This causes a tingling numbness or extreme pain that feels like someone is shooting small hot pins into your arms. If this happens, doctors can just yank out the rib. No harm, no foul. It's not like anyone was relying on it for much anyway. Ear muscles. Picture this. It's the prehistoric era when Earth is one big gigantic zoo and you're on the hunt for food. Aside from your hunting stick for attacking the prey and eyes for looking for prey, your ears would also wiggle to help you pinpoint sounds from a rabbit or a hungry lion that wants you as a snack. You see, our distant animal ancestors had these tiny little fibers of muscles around their ears known as the auricular muscles. These muscles help them direct their ears to better detect sound, just like you've probably seen your dog or pet rabbit do when you suddenly sneeze. Back then, the ability to swivel your ears like furry radar dishes to pinpoint sounds could make the difference between being dinner or living another day. However, as centuries went by and we basically separated from living with wild animals and literally now walk into a mall or KFC to get food, we no longer need to hear predators sneaking up on us. Our ears became stationary like statues, and the auricular muscles are now as useful as a fork in a bowl of soup. soup. The muscles are still there, but you probably don't even know you have it, except if you're one of the lucky few who can wiggle your ears as a rare party trick that impresses exactly no one, but still gives you a secret sense of triumph. As for the rest of us, our ear muscles are like antique furniture in a modern apartment. Charming for historical reasons, but mostly just collecting dust. Pyramidalis muscle. The pyramidalis muscle is a teeny tiny triangular muscle hanging out in your lower abdomen very close to your pelvis. Its job is to tense the linea alba, which is that line running down the middle of your six-pack, or where your six-pack would be if not for all those tacos. Think of it as a stagehand behind the curtain, helping your abs stay aligned and looking sharp. The pyramidalis is basically a leftover from our ancestors back when they were still running through the wild and used brute strength as the solution to every problem. The muscle provides them with a strong, steady core to wrestle saber-toothed tigers or move boulders the size of small cars to cover their cave homes at night. But ever since we've had machines and weapons and use common sense to solve our problems, we no longer rely on the pyramidalis muscle. And even if you do need to do any heavy lifting now, your abdominal muscles are now in charge of that position. So your pyramidalis muscle is kinda just there like a spare key you forgot existed until one day you accidentally lock yourself out. Only in this case, you'll probably never need it, and it doesn't even come with a cool keychain. Plantaris muscle. The plantaris muscle is like that one classmate who shows up to group projects, doesn't contribute to any of the work, and still gets an A. So basically, this muscle runs from just above your knee to your heel, sitting next to the much beefier calf muscle like a scrawny sidekick who's clearly not hitting the gym. Now, the plantaris is supposed to assist other muscles with flexing the knee and ankle, but your other leg muscles are so capable that the plantaris is just along for the ride, chiming in like a younger sibling trying to help, but mostly getting in the way. Think of it as the anatomical equivalent of a backup dancer who's always off stage. It's there, technically, but you wouldn't miss it if it were gone. And about 10% of people don't even have one. Its absence doesn't affect how you walk, run, or dodge a rogue Lego on the floor. For those who do have it, the plantaris is so thin and insignificant that surgeons sometimes use it as a spare part to repair injured tendons. It's like you're walking around with a spare tire in your leg. Now that you're upright and not swinging from trees to get your next meal or running from becoming a meal yourself, the plantaris is just clinging on to its job like it's waiting for a retirement bonus. Appendix. Picture your digestive system as a bustling factory assembly line. Your stomach acids breaking down food, intestines absorbing nutrients, and then there's the appendix, just hanging out at the junction of your small and large intestines, minding its own business like the introverted cousin at a family reunion. But life has not always been like this for the appendix. You see, back in the day when our ancient ancestors feasted on only raw leaves and tree bark like a committed vegan at a barbecue joint, the appendix was the OG organ for digesting their food. But fast forward the evolutionary clock to modern times, we're steaming vegetables and cooking meats to be so soft it could literally melt in your mouth. And the appendix, once the life of the party, now stands awkwardly in the corner holding a drink and wondering when it all went wrong. Now, the appendix is often dismissed as a useless relic from our evolutionary past and is gradually on its way out as up to 1 in 5 people are born without an appendix. For people who have an appendix, it's best known for 2 things: doing nothing and then suddenly causing a world of pain when it decides to throw a tantrum called appendicitis, a medical emergency that'd literally send you straight to the ER. It often ends with the appendix being evicted from your body like a bad tenant. You'd carry on just fine without it, and no one sends flowers for its departure. Erector pili muscles. Picture this. You're living way back in the era when humans were covered in a glorious coat of body hair like a Chewbacca, and you're pursuing the deer you'll have for lunch when you suddenly come face to face with a saber-toothed tiger. Your response to being in danger would trigger the erector pili muscles, which would make the hairs all over your body stand on end to make you appear bigger and scarier to predators. It's like a built-in puff-up mechanism, similar to what cats or porcupines do when they're threatened. The erector pili muscles would also activate when you're cold, scared, and emotional. It still happens in modern humans, but since our hair has mostly packed up and left, all you'd get when the erector pili muscles activate is just goosebumps, which makes you look a lot less like an intimidating jungle beast and more like an adorable plucked chicken. Since we now have sweaters and heaters and live pretty far away from predators, we no longer need the erector pili muscles, so this caused them to start dying off gradually. Now they're just like the fax machines of your body. Technically, they're functional, but wildly outdated. Evolution has not booted them out yet because, well, they're harmless, kinda like those decorative throw pillows on your couch. They're not strictly necessary, but they're not hurting anyone either. Gallbladder. If your body were an office, the gallbladder would be the underappreciated assistant who files paperwork efficiently until they unexpectedly quit, leaving the entire place in chaos for a hot minute. Now, your gallbladder looks a lot like a little pear tucked snugly under your liver. It's always working away quietly in the digestive system, storing and concentrating bile, a yellowish-green digestive juice made by the liver to help break down fatty foods. But your gallbladder could suddenly decide to become the drama queen of your digestive system, kind of like that quiet kid in class who suddenly throws a massive tantrum when things don't go his way. You'd start experiencing extreme pain that'd give you a one-way ticket to the ER, and the only solution would be to banish your gallbladder out of your body permanently. With your gallbladder removed, you can continue to live a perfectly normal life. The former task of the gallbladder would simply be handled by your liver now. Think of it as the sidekick to the liver's superhero. It's helpful, but when it's gone, the hero just finds another way to save the day. Spleen. If you've ever worked at a standard factory or visited one, you'd know that there's usually a quality control manager who checks out the final products to be sure they're top tier before they're packaged and distributed. Now, the spleen kinda plays the role of a quality control manager in your body, but for your blood cells. It filters your blood and allows the good ones to be distributed to different parts of your body, then kicks out unwanted guests like bacteria, viruses, and damaged cells. The organ would also keep the healthy blood cells and store them for emergencies, kind of like that stash of snacks you keep hidden for a rainy day. Now, if in the unfortunate event you're diagnosed with leukemia or sickle cell anemia, or got into an accident that leaves your spleen looking like it's lost a fight with a baseball bat, you can have it evicted in a procedure known as a splenectomy. People without their spleen can continue to live relatively normal lives as the liver and other blood tissues basically step up to take over some of the spleen's duties. It's like when the manager quits unexpectedly and the assistant manager and team scramble to cover his tasks. So, since the spleen is not completely necessary for our survival, it's an organ that might later get demoted to a bench warmer in the evolutionary lineup. But technically, it's not causing any harm, so evolution is not in a rush to file the paperwork to officially delete it. Earlobes. Earlobes are nature's version of decorative throw pillows. They're nice to have and occasionally useful for hanging shiny things, but your life wouldn't fall apart without them. They're basically just a mix of soft connective tissue and fat wrapped in skin, but serve no real purpose in helping you stay alive. Some people say that earlobes are most likely evolutionary leftovers that served as part of a sensory system or helped in body heat regulation in our primate ancestors like a built-in thermostat. But for modern humans, earlobes are more like the old apps on your phone that you don't use but can't delete. Even if evolution decided to phase them out, we'd still hear just fine, just look as human and probably save a lot of money on earrings. The biggest loss might be the inability to tug on your earlobes during moments of deep thought, or when your mom used them to get your attention as a kid. If you're wondering why your earlobes are still freeloading on your ears, it's because they're not causing any harm, they're just relaxed and chill, else evolution and Father Time would have started chopping them off. But as long as they continue to remain useless, they'd one day fade out of existence. The Jacobsons Organ. You've probably swiped through Tinder hoping to find love, or awkwardly asked your coworker to dinner praying you don't sound like a middle schooler before a dance. This is basically the standard to find love in the 21st century, a battlefield of pickup lines, emojis, and more rejection than a poorly written Netflix plot. But if you rewind the evolutionary clock to a few million years, finding love, or at least someone to share a moment with, was a much simpler process, though a bit shocking by today's standards. Instead of awkward small talk or figuring out if they're just not that into you, early humans simply sniffed out who was ready to mingle thanks to pheromones, nature's version of scented love letters. And just like that, they'd get down to business. No expensive dinner dates, no guessing games, and definitely no rejection, just a nose full of pheromonal truths. It's like Cupid armed with a spray bottle instead of arrows. Our ancient ancestors were able to detect these pheromones with their Jacobsons organ, a sneaky little structure hiding out in the nose. It was like a secret pheromone-detecting radar that cut straight through the confusion. Modern humans still have the Jacobsons organ, but since we started relying more on sight and words to find love, the organ basically went into a permanent retirement plan. These days, it's like the antenna on an old car. Still attached, but not really picking up anything useful anymore. So technically, the organ is completely useless. And as more dating apps flood our screens, Jacobsons organ will take a permanent exit from our body in the coming years.